All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. It is Schus Baruch Hashem to be able to restart up. Everyone had a good summer. It's hard to believe that we are just a few weeks away from Yamim Noraim. So we've used this slot for different things over the summer and over the years. What I'd like to try to do this morning, feels like tonight already, to try to do this morning is focus a little bit on Kapitel Chav Zayin. The capital of L'Davar Hashem Ori V'Yishi, which of course is the chapter of Tehillim that we recite from the beginning of Chodesh Elul all the way through Shmini Atzeres. And to try to tap in a little bit into the power, profundity of this particular capital. And obviously it's a multifaceted capital. Now the fact, and hopefully everyone has sheets. There are sheets if anyone needs, there are more sheets. Hindle, maybe do me a favor. Just take in the back if anyone needs. Thank you so much. Thank you. The fact that we recite this capital from the beginning of Chodesh Elul all the way through the end of Sukkot clearly indicates to us that it has a multifaceted meaning. Right? There are messages in here that are somehow meant to kind of hold us and carry us and guide us through the differentiated experiences. Because remember, Elul is one experience. Rosh Hashanah, different experience. Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, a third experience. Yom Kippur, a fourth experience. The days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, okay, you get the point. Fifth experience. First day Sukkot, Chol HaMoed Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres, and Frost and Chutar, Simchas Torah, all differentiated experiences. And yet, with all of those differentiated experiences, we're reciting L'Davar Hashem Ori V'Yishi this entire time. So there must be in this capital, obviously, differentiated messages that speak to us in different ways at different intervals, but at the same time, certain overarching messages that are necessary for every step along this journey. So let's take a quick look first at the capital itself. L'Davar Hashem, Ori V'Yishi, Mimi Ira, Hashem Ma'os Chayai Mimi Efchad. So first of all, interestingly enough, we know this capital is unique. How do you know already out of the gate the capital is unique? How do you know? What's missing? Mizmor, right? A lot of Tehillim usually is Mizmor L'David Mizmar. Every once in a while you come across a capital that is just L'David, which is very interesting. Because usually whenever there's Mizmor, remember again, David HaMelech wrote Tehillim, or most of Tehillim. Not all of Tehillim was written by David HaMelech. Certain capitals were authored by others. But why did David HaMelech write Sefer Tehillim? For what purpose? What purpose? What did David HaMelech want more than anything in the world? Yes, HaMelech, one thing you want to do. What would he have said? Build the Beis HaMikdash. That's what David HaMelech wanted to do. For a variety of reasons, he was unable to build the Beis HaMikdash. A variety of different reasons. So he did everything else but build it. He purchased the real estate, right? The threshing floor from Aravna HaYevusi. He went ahead and he composed all of the music that the Levitic choir would sing. That's Tehillim. Tehillim is the music, Today, it's interesting. Some people like a Karl Bach davening. They don't like a Karl Bach davening. In the Beis HaMikdash, music was a part of the avoda. In fact, the Rambam paskins that if you did the avoda, if you did the sacrificial service in the Beis HaMikdash without shira, without Levitic song, the sacrificial service is invalid. Song, music was an indispensable part of Beis HaMikdash life. So David HaMelech composed the music. Sefer Tehillim is the music for the Levitic choir. That's what it is. So what's interesting is Mizmar, literally, what does Mizmar mean? Literally, to the conductor. So who's the conductor? It's the conductor of the Levitic choir. David HaMelech is often giving instructions, what instruments to use, what type of music to be used. On a deeper level, Mizmor also represents the idea that David HaMelech often inspired himself through music. That sometimes in order to elevate his soul, in order to elevate himself to get into the right mindset, he would use music. Many of us could relate to this. It's the power of music. Music unlocks something within us that a shir can't, right? That a Dvar Torah can't, that learning can't. Music just speaks to a different part of the soul. So interestingly enough, Mizmor LeDavid means David HaMelech inspired himself with music. LeDavid Mizmar usually means that David HaMelech first inspired himself, then brought in music. And LeDavid represents a complete state of self-inspiration. LeDavid is David HaMelech understanding that in life, I spoke about this in a different context, but one of the things that we often forget about inspiration, right? Everyone, it's incredible. Everyone's looking for inspiration. Everyone's looking for it, right? So whether it's from YouTube Shorts, or whether it's from a show, whether it's from this or that, we're all looking. But we forget one very important thing. Real inspiration never comes from anything external. Real inspiration comes from within. If you want to be an inspired Jew in life, you have to self-inspire. For the simple reason that if you leave your inspiration to others, you're outsourcing. You're giving up control over anytime you outsource things to others, you're giving up the reins of control. Giving up the reins of control often is, we're going to talk about that, but it's one of the worst things you could do in life. Sometimes it's one of the best things you could do in life. When it comes to inspiration, it's your job. No one's going to inspire you about you. Other people could help, but the choice to be an inspired Jew, the choice to live an inspired life, that's your choice. That's LeDavid. The David represents a moment where David HaMelech self-inspires. I understand that my religious, my spiritual, my Judaic outlook on life is up to me and me alone. There could be other things that help, other factors that help, but at the end of the day, it's in my hands. So David HaMelech goes on, David Hashem, Ori V'ishi, Hashem is my light, He's my salvation. Who should I be afraid of? Hashem ma'oz chayai, mimi efchad. Bikrov alai miraim, just take a quick look at it. We're not going to read the whole thing, just take a look at it. Bikrov alai miraim le'achos bisari. So again, the wording over here is so strong. When evildoers come close to me to devour my flesh, tsarai va'ayvai, enemies surround me, hema kashlu v'nafalu. They fall down. They fail. And David HaMelech says, ultimately, even if my enemies camp against me, I have complete trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One request from Hashem, Shifti beveis Hashem kol yemei chayai. Let me dwell in the house of Hashem all the days of my life. And you could go on. You could go on in the kapitel. And the kapitel, what's if I were to ask you, and you've seen, all of us have seen this chapter of Tehillim. What's the theme, the overarching theme? This is the interactive part of the shir, right? What's the overarching theme? By the way, the English is here. It's not like a trick question. What's the overarching theme? To be with Hashem, that is a theme. Is it the overarching theme? The overarching theme of this kapitel, which is the same overarching theme of most of Sefer Tehillim, is I am in trouble. I am in trouble. Look at the vivid imagery that David HaMelech begins this. Bekrov alai miraim le'echol es bisari. My enemies are all around me to devour my flesh. He doesn't say I'm in trouble. That's a lesson of like being consumed. Not existential trouble. And if you look at the rest of the kapitel, it's pretty much all the same theme. I'm in trouble, I'm desperate, but of course then there's always a feeling of hope, of optimism. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to come through for me. Now what's interesting is, and David HaMelech gets quite graphic in these, Al taster panechem mimeni, Hashem, whatever you do, please do not turn away from me. Do not make me feel forsaken. In this kapitel, David HaMelech says one of the most dramatic statements in all of Sefer Tehillim. Ki avi v'imi azavuni v'Hashem ya'asveni. My mother and my father, they have forsaken me, and Hashem collects me. That statement by itself is so powerful. What does that mean? My mother and my father are forsaking me. So the Mefarshim themselves are somewhat split on this. They say human relationships are finite. At some point in time, no matter how much parents love a child, the parents die, and the children are here in this world alone. That's the normal derech that the world takes. Parents, no matter how much they love their child, no parent could stay here forever to protect their child. It's just the way that it works. So David HaMelech says, my mother and my father, they left me. On a deeper level, what is David HaMelech saying? And this might sound like a little bit jaded, but it's not. It's just real. If there's one thing that you could count on in your human relationships, it is one thing you could count on in every single human relationship. I mean, even like the most loving relationships. It's that what? Someone is going to disappoint you. And I know, like, you're thinking to yourself, whatever you do, don't give relationship advice. Right? But it's actually the best relationship advice. At some point in life, the people who you love will disappoint you and let you down. It's true in marriage, it's true in friendship, it's true with parents, it's true with children. You are going to be disappointed and probably profoundly disappointed, disillusioned, hurt, feelings maybe even of betrayal by people who you love. And here's the point to remember, not because they want to, but because we're people, we're human beings. And no one's perfect, and no one ever lives up to expectations, especially if those expectations may be a little bit unrealistic. And whether we recognize it or not, we often harbor unrealistic expectations of our loved ones. We expect them to be perfect. We expect them to be attentive. We expect them to know what we want and what we need, even though we've never articulated it, right? Somehow, who could live up to that? Who could possibly do that? So David HaMelech says, I've been disappointed and disillusioned in every relationship in life, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're still here for me. Now, it doesn't mean David HaMelech wasn't disappointed in Hashem. We'll talk about that in greater depth. But the point over here is the theme of this kapitel. It's interesting. The theme of this kapitel is not Yamim Noraim, right? It's not tshuva. It's not tshuva. It's not judgment, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. It's not even return to Hashem. There's a little bit of return to Hashem. But it's an overarching theme that you find in most of Sefer Tehillim, which is, I'm in serious trouble, Ribono Shel Olam. Serious trouble. Overwhelming existential trouble. And I don't know how I'm going to get out of it, but I believe some way, somehow, you're going to steer me out of it. And it's fascinating that this is the kapitel that we read for close to 2 months every single year. This kapitel, this theme. By the way, there are other kapitels that speak about tshuva. There are other kapitels that speak about just striving for closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But this kapitel speaks about, again, almost like the existential angst of the human condition. I'm in trouble. I'm surrounded by enemies. I feel like I'm going to be swallowed up. Literally, my enemies are devouring my flesh. If everything looks hopeless, but I feel like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, somehow you're going to pull me through. So why is this the central theme of Yamim Noraim? So to appreciate this, and we've spoken about this over the course of many years of learning Tehillim, one of the things that is often overlooked in Tehillim is that Sefer Tehillim is a little bit of a biography of David HaMelech's life. What do I mean by that? Different kapitlach were authored at different stages and different points of David HaMelech's life. And sometimes when you skim a little bit beneath the surface, you could see what was happening in David HaMelech's life, and then the kapitel takes on a totally different meaning. In general, whenever we learn, we often learn a lot of commentaries. I've often found like the one thing, from my own education, that I think is often lacking is we don't know who the commentaries were, where they lived, or what the life experiences were. Well, if you don't know when someone lived or what the life experience, you can't fully appreciate the profundity of their commentary. Just to give you a simple example of this, in Parshas Tetzaveh, the Torah speaks about the big day kahuna, the clothing of the kahuna, of the Kohen. And one of the things that the Kohen wore was what's called an ephod. So we normally translate ephod as like an apron. So the Mefarshim struggle to understand this. So Rashi says something so sweet. Rashi says, this is just like the apron that the French women wear. So Rashi says, so again, it's helpful to know when Rashi lived. It's also helpful to know that Rashi lived in France. I don't know that it helps us understand anymore what the ephod looked like, but it's fascinating, and you begin to see a lot of things. Commentaries who lived under times of persecution may view things in a certain way. Commentaries who lived during times of Baruch Hashem, incredible bracha, may view things in a certain way. So David HaMelech, Tehillim, is his autobiography. This is David HaMelech's autobiography. And in each kapitel, you could unlock a story of David HaMelech's life. So what's the backstory? This is incredible. What's the backstory to kapitel Chav Zayin, David Hashem or Revi'ishi? Take a look at number 2. The Medrash Rabbah writes the following. Medrash writes, this is incredible. He says, Rabbi Shimon Levi, Pasar Krab, Be'amalekim, Bekrov alai miraim, Elu Amalekim. When David HaMelech says, my enemies approached me, ultimately, again, who is he referring to? He's referring to the Amalekim, the Amalekites. Amalek. What Amalek? Shenemar. V'Amalekim pashtu el Negev ve'el Tsiklag le'echoles bisari u'shtei neshei David nishbu. So the Medrash tells us the exact biographical window we needed to know. David HaMelech authored this kapitel after the tragedy of Tziklag. What happened in Tziklag? Funny you should ask. Take a look at source number 3. This is an incredible and riveting story. So just give a little bit of backdrop to this. David HaMelech, remember again, right? You think you have problems with your in-laws? Remember, no one had as big problems as David HaMelech. Maybe your in-laws don't like you, but most probably they don't want to kill you. Well, David HaMelech, again, his father-in-law was Shaul, and Shaul wanted to kill David because Shaul thought that David was trying to steal the throne. David, of course, was not trying to steal anything. David had no interest in the monarchy. David had no interest in being king. What did David HaMelech want to do with his life? What did he want to do? He wanted to be a shepherd. That's all he wanted. David HaMelech wanted to be left alone with his sheep. He was happy with the solitude. He didn't need to be around people because his interactions with people weren't good. He had a difficult family life growing up. His brothers mistreated him. His father mistreated him. At the end of the day, or I shouldn't say fun, he had difficult family dynamics. David HaMelech was happy to just kind of be alone in the field. That's all he wanted. That's all he needed. By the way, much like Avram, much like Yitzchak, much like Yaakov, all of our greatest leaders really only wanted one thing in life, which was to be left alone. That's all, a life of solitude, of service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So David HaMelech, therefore, chooses not to fight Shaul, right? Shaul's actively trying to kill him. There are people who supported David, but David chose to flee instead of to fight. He did not want to fight his father-in-law. So he sought refuge in different places. Now, obviously, seeking refuge within the kingdom of Klal Yisrael was going to be problematic, because if you harbored David, you were essentially participating in what would be perceived as a rebellion against the king. So he finally escapes to the kingdom of Gat. Gat, Gimel Saf, Gat. The king of Gat was a man by the name of Achish. David HaMelech helped him out a little bit. So Achish said, fine, I'll give you refuge. I'll give you refuge. And he allowed David and his men. David had 600 men, 600 followers. And together again, it was them and their families. And they all settled in the city of Tziklag. That's where they lived. Achish got involved in a battle. David was his ally. So David goes with his army of 600 men to aid the king of Gat, to aid Achish. So what happens? When David and his men left the city of Tziklag, Amalek took advantage of the fact that there were no men in the city. What did they do? They raided the city of Tziklag. They took everyone, they took the women and children captive, killed any men who were left behind, and totally plundered the city. If you take a look at source number 4, what happens? So now David HaMelech comes back from war. He comes back from war. He comes back after the battle, and what happens? Vayhi bevo David va'anashav Tziklag. So David and his men come back to Tziklag. Bayom hashlishi va'amaleki pashtu el Negev vel Tziklag vayaku es Tziklag vayisrifu oso. They burnt the city down to the ground. Amalek burnt the city down to the ground. Vayishpu es hanashim asher ba mikaton va'agadol lo emisu ish vayinagu vayelchu l'darkam. They took all the women and children, so there was no one left in Tziklag. No one left in Tziklag, right? Because the men were out doing battle. They burnt down the city, took all of the possessions, and took the women and children captive. Vayavo David va'anashav ela'ir v'nesrufa ba'esh u'neshehem uvenehem uvenosehem nishbu. So imagine the scene. David HaMelech comes back to Tziklag after waging a successful battle, helping out Achish, the king of Gat. And what does he see? His home is burnt down to the ground. His own wives, David HaMelech had 2 wives, his own wives and his children and everyone else's wives and children were taken captive. Vayisa David va'am asher ito es kolam, vayifku ad asher ein b'hem koach livkos. It's really a very profound pasuk. So this is again, source number 4. Pasuk 4. David and the men who were with him raised their voice and they cried and cried and cried until they had no more strength to cry. Now understand, what does that sound like? Crying and crying until they have no more strength to cry? What emotional state is that? Despair, like it's Yeush. It's Yeush. Remember again, these are warriors. These are soldiers. So these are hardened men. I often say, whenever you see like a painting of David HaMelech, right? What is he always drawn holding? What is he always holding? A harp. I wonder, I think David HaMelech spent like 3 minutes with a harp, right? Maybe 3 minutes. His life was spent with the sword. He was a warrior. He was a warrior from the time that ultimately he donned the armor of Shaul and he killed Goliath, which happened as a young man, until the day of his death. He was a warrior. So for warriors like this to come back and to cry until they have no more strength to cry, that's like there are different types of cries that exist. This is a cry of like broken kite, just being totally broken. So what happens? And David HaMelech's own 2 wives were taken captives. Now, things got worse. How did they get worse? The people, in other words, David HaMelech's followers, wanted to kill David. Why? Kimara nefesh kala'am ish albanov va'abenosav va'ischazek David ba'Hashem Elokav. So now everybody was ready to kill David. Why were they ready to kill David? Because they thought, this is your fault. This is your fault. You're our leader, right? At the end of the day, the way leadership works is, right, there aren't a lot of shkoyachs for the successes, but there's absolute widespread condemnation for every single failure, right? Because the buck stops with the leader. So David, this happened on your watch. You're the leader. And so they turn on him. So now to make everything worse, so now the city's burnt down. The women and children have been taken captive. No one's in the city. The possessions are gone. And now with all of that, they're ready to turn on David HaMelech. So here's what's amazing. So now the Medrash in number 2 says, what was David HaMelech's response to the episode at Tziklag? LeDavid Hashem Ori V'yishi. LeDavid Hashem Ori V'yishi. This capital 27, was written literally again in the smoldering ashes of Tziklag. Now again, the good news is, I don't want to leave it on a cliffhanger, right? The story ends well, Baruch Hashem. They go to war against Amalek, they get back the women and children, right? So it ends, but we're not focusing on that. In that moment, when they come to the smoldering heap that was their home, that was Tziklag, that's when David HaMelech writes, Kapitel Chav Zayin, Kapitel 27, LeDavid Hashem Ori V'yishi. Now, by the way, once you understand this, now the imagery in the Kapitel makes a lot more sense. Bekrov alai mera'im le'acholes bisari. My enemies came to devour my flesh. You understand that phraseology now. Why? They took their wives and their children. It's not just like a battle. It's not just that they came for possessions. They took everyone and everything. So the intensity of the Kapitel, right, the feeling of being encircled by enemies of the Kapitel, now makes so much more sense. And the desperation of the Kapitel begins to make sense as well. Because if you notice, over and over in this particular chapter of Tehillim, David HaMelech puts forward a voice of, I feel like I don't know what to do. I feel like I have no options. I don't know what I'm supposed to do or where I am supposed to go in life. And you understand it now. Right? Who could imagine the feeling of those men when they came back after being successful in battle? The feelings of guilt, leaving their wives and their children unprotected, their city unprotected, and now wondering, what's going to happen? Where are they, right? They had no idea what Amalek had or hadn't done with these women and children. Were they alive, not alive, held captive? They had no idea. That's Kapitel Chav Zayin. That feeling of profound and complete, utter helplessness in the face of adversity. If you take a look at source number 5, I want to share with you something amazing. So this is from the Perush on Tehillim called Mina Be'er. See, he writes over as follows. Again, it's a part of a much bigger piece. But let's take a look at just a few pieces out of this. Furthermore, again, David's plight was amplified over the plight of the rest of the people. Why? Because remember again, everybody was suffering. David HaMelech had it even worse. Why? Because everyone was putting the fault and the blame for him on this, it was on him. It was all on him. So all the pain that they were all feeling was fundamentally compounded. Skip down a little bit. Skip down to the second paragraph. I'm sorry, I forgot to number the paragraphs. Hagam, shebemeshech yemei chayav kvar avru al David kol minei matzavim kashim. Now, I think I mentioned this line every single shir on Tehillim. David HaMelech faced every problem you could imagine in life, right? He had problems with Shalom Bayis. He had problems with his family. He lost a child. He had struggles with health. He had enemies, internal, external, right? The only problem that David HaMelech didn't have was money. Baruch Hashem, he came from a wealthy family, and one of the perks of being king, you're going to be wealthy, right? He came from a wealthy family, he married wealthy, and Baruch Hashem, some money. That was the only thing he didn't struggle with. But besides money, besides parnasa, every other challenge that you could come up with in the human condition. And by the way, how long did David HaMelech's problems last for? How long did they last for? Do you remember David HaMelech's at the end of Melachim Aleph? I guess it's Melachim Aleph. At the end of Melachim Aleph, so you remember again, David HaMelech is dying. He's dying. He's on his deathbed. He's literally drawing his last breaths. You remember how David HaMelech's last moments on this earth were spent? His son, Adoniel ben Chagis, essentially launches a revolt. It wasn't a violent revolt. It was he proclaimed himself as king. And Bathsheba comes in. Her husband is dying. Naaseh comes in like David. Who's going to be the next king? So literally, he's dying. He's breathing. He's taking his last breaths. And even he couldn't die peacefully. He just could not. There was no peace for David HaMelech in this world. He was tzara after tzara after tzara after tzara. Bathsheba, everything. So he writes over here, David HaMelech had a really difficult life. And every challenge that you could imagine, he had it. Kisha'amar kvar kama pamim b'fnei hariga redifos mikol makom me'olam lo amad b'matzav kasha kazeh. So this is incredible. So the Minaber, the author over here posits, if you want to know what was David HaMelech's greatest challenge, Siklag. This was the greatest challenge. This event was the most catastrophic event of David HaMelech's life. And it makes a lot of sense. Why? Because first of all, again, remember, sometimes, when we know how the story ends, like, oh, it's not so bad. But remember, before you know how the story ends, understand the enormity of what happened. David HaMelech was responsible for leading the army out. David HaMelech was responsible for leaving the city unprotected, which means he was responsible for the abduction of his own family and everyone else's family. So again, this is perhaps the greatest catastrophic event of David HaMelech's life. The fact that it has a happy ending, remember, don't think about the ending. You got to think about what it is right now at this moment. Most catastrophic event of David HaMelech's life, and then compounded that everyone turns on David, right? And everyone is ready now to literally lynch David HaMelech because of what he did. He says, so skip down a little bit. Skip down now to the third paragraph. He goes on, he sees, and by the way, as a leader, to see the suffering of your constituents, right? To see all of those men mourning the families that they lost, and to know that at least in some part, you are responsible. If you think about this, all of David HaMelech's other suffering, it was localized to him. It was his suffering. This suffering ultimately applied to everyone, and he was responsible for it. Skip down to the third paragraph. Zos va'od lo daish lo haya lo imat li'schazek gam lo nish'ar lo im mi li'hischazek. And this is profound. Not only did David HaMelech not have something to comfort him, but he had no one to comfort him. His family was gone. His family was gone, right? Ki avi v'imi azavuni. There's no one here. There's no one here. I can't go to Chizik to my other friends around because they hate me now, because they think I'm responsible. So what's happening in David HaMelech's life is this moment of profound existential loneliness. So on one hand, there's catastrophic circumstances. The city is burned to the ground. The women and children are missing. No one knows what has happened to them. And there is no one for me to lean on. There's no one for me to talk with. There's no one for me to cry to. There's no one for me to get chizik from. There's no one, nothing. I am all alone by myself in this moment. He goes on. This is such a profound idea. I'm in the second to last paragraph. In general, when you're having a difficult time in life, so what do? Yesh hamischazik b'fnei hamishpacha, hamachzikim zeh et zeh. Yesh shemisnachem b'rechusho, ulefamim yesh chaver tov sheniti l'schazikim. It's interesting. People seek comfort in different ways. Some people find comfort from their family. Some people find comfort from their friends. And interestingly enough, some people find comfort from their stuff, from their possessions. What do I mean by that? If I have possessions, at least, again, financially I'm solid. I have what I need. So at least I know, again, that hopefully I have the financial building blocks to go ahead and rebuild. In this moment, in this moment, when David HaMelech comes back to Tziklag, what does he have? Lelo mishpacha. There's no family. Lelo rechush. There's no possessions. The games hachaverim vayididim hakrovim biyoser ibaid. And there are no friends. There's nothing. There's nothing in this world. And therefore, what happens? So just to understand, what happened? Last paragraph. Az nisa David es tfilaso vayischazik David b'Hashem Elokav. So what does David HaMelech do? Having absolutely nothing in this world and not knowing how he's going to survive this particular predicament, what does he say? LeDavid, David, you have one thing and one thing only in this world. Hashem. You have one thing and one thing only in this world. The Ribono Shel Olam. You have nothing and no one else to depend on. Now, the good thing is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can be enough. Ori v'yishi. He can light my way ahead of me and show me, kind of direct me where to go, and ultimately provide me with salvation. But this is the theme of this kapitel. A feeling of absolute, there's no one. There's no one, there's nothing. I have no one I could depend on. I have no one I could turn to. There is no rock. There is no source of stability in my life. It is just me and my overwhelming circumstances. So you have two choices in those moments, David HaMelech says. Either crumble or surrender. What do I mean by surrender? Not surrender, wave the white flag, but almost as if surrender yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ribono Shel Olam, you are the only entity in this world that has me. No one else and nothing else has my back. Because relationships come and go. Possessions come and go. Friends come and go. The only true source of stability in this world, Ribono Shel Olam, is you. And it's interesting. When did David HaMelech learn this incredible lesson? When did he learn it? In Tziklag. Because out of all of his suffering, there was only one time in life where he had absolutely nothing. And that was the moment that he came back to the smoldering ashes of Tziklag. No possessions, no friends, and no family. And in that moment, David HaMelech says, Ribono Shel Olam, I need to give myself over to you. And that's why there's no Mizmor LeDavid, no LeDavid Mizmor. There's nothing. There's nothing. All there is in that moment is just LeDavid. So what is David going to do? David is going to surrender and give himself over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, again, when I say give yourself over to Hashem, that does not mean that there's no ishtadlus. Remember, again, after David HaMelech gives himself over to Hashem, then what does he do? What's the next step? Again, I didn't put the next chapter of Melech. What's the next step? What's the next step? He gets himself together and he goes to war with Amalek. So giving yourself over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not mean surrendering dynamic activity on your own part, but it's a mindset. And it's a mindset that often we only come to when we come to one of those Tziklag moments in life. And I think that all of us have those Tziklag moments. We all have those Tziklag moments, right? We all undergo adversity and difficulty in life. But we have those Tziklag moments where perhaps, for whatever the reason, there's no family to lean on. And not because I don't have family, but sometimes they're just not there for me in the way that I need it. There's no friends, because friends sometimes can be there when they're convenient, but they're not there when you really need them. And sometimes there's no possessions because of a variety of different life circumstances. We all have those Tziklag moments in life. And in those moments, which are the most acutely painful moments in life, David HaMelech teaches us, embed yourself with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Ribono Shel Olam will hold you through it. He'll steer you through it, but you have to give yourself over to him. If you're willing to do a David moment of Hashem, he'll be your Ori V'yishi. Perhaps, this is why we read this kapitel during Elul. You know, it's interesting. We're preparing ourselves for a whole variety of different things. Right? What are we doing during Elul? What are we doing during Elul? I mean, come on, people. We're 2 weeks in, right? What are we doing during Elul? Right? We're doing all different kinds of things, working our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, perhaps, again, a little bit of introspection, self-evaluation, personalistic inventory, thinking about, I'm not doing tshuva yet. We're not up to tshuva just yet. But I'm kind of thinking about the year that I live, the year I want to live. I want to get my life right. I want to become the best version of me. Elul is the most beautiful and joyous month of the entire year because there are untold possibilities about what I could do and what I can make of my life. But I think as we go into the year, there has to be a reality that as much as we prepare ourselves, there are going to be things that happen in life that we are fundamentally unprepared for. We don't like to think this way because most of us, if there's one thing we want more than anything in life, it is control. Control. I want to be in control. And so I don't like to think about moments where I'm not in control. But if you want to be really in control of life, you have to acknowledge the fact that you are probably going to be hit upside the head this coming year by circumstances you never saw coming and by things that you could have never anticipated and realities that I'm totally fundamentally unprepared for. Just think about this for just a moment. Just yesterday, at a bus stop in Ramot, there were 6 precious neshamas that were getting ready for the day ahead. You know, each of them, I guarantee you, each of them had plans and had dreams and had goals and had aspirations. And they were part of family units. And they were husbands, they were sons, they were fathers, they were grandmothers. They had whole worlds they had planned for themselves, and whole worlds revolved around them. And literally, again, in a matter of seconds, it's not just 6 families, right? Because each of those 6 families are tethered to so many other family units. Hundreds, if not thousands of lives were instantaneously changed in an irreversible way. 4 holy soldiers killed at an attack on an army base in Gaza City. Again, kids, children, literally children. Families irreversibly changed. Lives irreversibly changed in moments. Life is filled with this. Just if you're following the news, Israel just a little while ago did a missile strike in Doha in Qatar, taking out Hamas leadership. They took out Hamas leadership. I don't know, good, bad, helpful, not helpful, end the war. No idea. One thing is clear, which is the ripple effects will certainly be felt in a dramatic way. Life is filled with these kind of circumstances. Now, we don't like to think about it. We don't like to think about it because we like to be in control, and I don't want to think about the unknown because I can't wrap my head around because I can't control the unknown. You're right. You can't control the unknown, but you have to be ready for it. You know, so often in life, circumstances come about. And like I said, it's those circumstances, you know, those life events that literally hit us upside the head. It's like the punch in the gut that takes the wind out of me. And we're so immobilized and we're so paralyzed because I wasn't prepared for life to go off the rails. If there's one thing you should always be prepared for, is that life is going to go off the rails. It's only a question of how significant the derailment is. Is it a little bit off or like major derailment? But be prepared for it. Don't be scared of it. Embrace it. Okay, I'm not going to look forward to it. But just be ready that it is part of the human condition. Be ready for it. Because if you're not, you'll be paralyzed and immobilized when it happens. But what should I do? How do I prepare? How do I prepare for the unknown? And the answer is, you can't prepare for the unknown except to know that when that unknown derailment occurs, which it will, there's only one place to go, and that's to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. David, when David suffered life derailment, Hashem ori v'yishi. And this is what we do during Chodesh Elul. And this is what we do. It's fascinating. It's not about Shuvah. It's not about Shuvah. Okay, there's a reference to Sukkah. Kibisuki is saying this is a reference to Sukkah. It's not about Shuvah. It actually has nothing to do with Shuvah. This entire kapitel is all about the unanticipated, overwhelming circumstances of life. It's about the tziklug moments of the human condition. And as we prepare for the new year, day after day, we remind ourselves, stuff is going to happen that I never foresaw, that I could have never planned for, that I could have never been prepared for. And the true medal of my spiritual success in life, success in life is not about how you deal with the choreographed parts of life, right? Think about this in just a moment, right? No one gets a shkoyach for driving carpool, right? I should get a shkoyach for driving carpool, right? Why does no one get a shkoyach for driving carpool? Because carpool is choreographed, right? There's a dismissal time, there's a spot that's yours, so just follow the rules. Do what you're supposed to do, show up on time, don't block traffic, don't triple park, right? And go ahead, right? Pull into your spot, get your kid, and go home, right? That's it, right? So a lot of life is like carpool. It's like carpool. They're choreographed, it's done. But the real moments that define who and what we are the chaotic moments, are the tziklug moments. And so often we lose it in those moments. We lose control of ourselves, we lose direction, we feel hopeless, we feel cast into the pit of despair without realizing that those are the moments that really define us. And they're going to happen. And don't pretend like they're not going to happen. And no matter how successful you are, no matter how happy you are, no matter how many things you have going for you in life, you are going to have your tziklug moments. The Ari HaKadosh, the Arizal says so beautifully, I've mentioned this many times. The Arizal says that, why do we cry at a chasana? Or just in general about like happy events. Crying is more often the emotional reaction to sadness. So why do we cry during happy events? The Ari says something so profound. He says because deep down the neshama knows it's not going to last. It's not going to last. Not that the marriage is not going to last. I mean, just like deep down we know that this incredible feeling of happiness, this joy, something's going to happen. Right? Something's going to happen because that's what life is. That's what life, we go through life with totally unrealistic and flawed expectations of what life is supposed to be. Somewhere, somehow, and I think this is a result of Western culture, we think that life is all good, and life is all beautiful, and life is all fantastic, and everything is always supposed to go your way and fall into place exactly what it is. And I'm supposed to find my shidduch at this age, and if I don't find it at and everything, and then I'm supposed to have children like this, and my shalom bayis is supposed to be like this, and this, and all these things. And then when it doesn't go that way, we're like, oh my gosh, like it's a crisis of faith. Crisis of faith. I can't believe it. Well, take a step back, dial it back a little bit. Where'd you get those expectations from? Whoever said to us that life is easy, whoever said to us that just because I have a plan, that somehow that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plan for me. So much of life is a sense of humility, of recognizing, Adam la'amo yulad. Yeah, life is filled with challenges, that's it. It's filled with challenges, it's filled with so much beauty, so much simcha, so much good. But challenge is part of the human condition day in and day out. The only variable is how acute your challenges are. And we need to prepare ourselves for that. And we need to bolster ourselves for that. And we need to ready ourselves for that. Jews are tough. We forgot that Jews are tough. We forgot about that. Because for 2,000 years, we were cowering. And for 2,000 years, we were running. I often say, one of the most incredible things to me, I get to go to Eretz Yisrael. I get to go to Eretz Yisrael very often. And one of the things that I still cannot stop marveling at is that there are Jewish soldiers. There are Jewish soldiers. And by the way, like, they're tough. They're tough. And we're an army. We're a force to be reckoned with. We're a spiritual force to be reckoned with. And Baruch Hashem, in Tafshin Pei 5785, 2025, we are a military force to be reckoned with. Jews are strong. We're probably stronger than anyone. And we've forgotten that a little bit. Especially, excuse me for saying it, we diaspora Jewry have forgotten about that a little bit. There's a lot we can learn from our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael because they're much tougher, and they're much more weathered, and their emunah runs so much deeper sometimes than ours. And the craziest stuff that happens, and yet still stay on the straight and narrow. We need to remind ourselves that we are so much stronger than we could even imagine. And we cannot allow ourselves to buckle at the first appearance of adversity. And we cannot allow ourselves to crumble when life goes off the rails. Whatever it is that comes our way, we got it. And acknowledge and accept and say, I am ready for my tziklug moments of life. I'm not looking forward to it. I want everything to be perfect. I want everything to be beautiful, but it's not going to be that way. But I'm ready for my tziklug moments. David HaMelech teaches us how to be ready. How are you ready? Kapitel Chav Zayin. Create and cultivate a strong relationship with Hashem. That will be your anchor in your tziklug moments. Now, I want to be very careful. Our strong relationship with Hashem, and this is, I think, sometimes where we do a little bit of a theological disservice. A strong relationship with Hashem is not going to give you everything you want in life. And this is very important. Because sometimes people don't understand, but I daven and I give tzedakah and I do this. Why don't I have everything that I want? Why? Because you have the ideology and the theology of a 3-year-old. That's why. That's why. That's not how HaKadosh Baruch Hu works. What do you think, right? Oh, good mamala, good shefala, good tatala. Okay, good. Oh, thank you. You davened. Here you go. Here you go. Here's bags of money, right? Or here's your basher. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a plan. Has a plan. Our job is to work. Our job is to figure out our place. Our job is to perfect ourselves, to push ourselves to be better without knowing necessarily how all those pieces of the plan work. But one thing is absolutely unequivocally true, which is if we have a relationship with Hashem, a strong relationship, not a quid pro quo relationship, not I've given you, so now what are you giving me back? Not a relationship with expectations, but a relationship because it's good to have that relationship. That relationship stables me. It stabilizes me. It's my anchor. It's my rock. And no matter what life throws my way, I got it. I might emerge from those derailment moments, those tziklug moments, bruised, battered, and changed forever, but I'll be standing. I'll make it through. I'll make it through and I'll rebuild. And somehow, some way, it's going to be beautiful, incredible, and great. And that's the entire essence of Kapitel Lamed Zayin. To prepare us to bolster ourselves. You know, only a Jew could speak out of his or her mouth on both sides, meaning, what I mean by that, on one hand, we believe with complete certainty that the coming year is going to be fantastic and beautiful and great. What do we do on Rosh Hashanah? What do we do on Rosh Hashanah night? We have all of these simanim. And do you ever wonder to yourself, like, if somebody who never saw this came and sat at your table, right, and they saw this stuff, right? I'm going to dip an apple into honey. It should taste shana to the top musuka. I'm going to take a fish head, right? Tiela rosh for all the zana, right? If you're very ambitious, the head of a cat, right? Head of a sheep, right? There are all this other stuff that we have, right? Dates and this and that we're having, like a whole group of foods that have no business being eaten together, right? And suddenly now we're eating them all together. Why? Good omens. What are you talking about? Good omens? First, we don't even believe in omens, right? So good omens, what that means is I believe that things are going to be good. I believe it's going to be sweet. I believe that the default setting in life is bracha. And yet at the same time, I also recognize I'm going to deal with adversity. To the world, that sounds like a contradiction. To us, that's called life. I believe in absolute bracha, but I also know that there's going to be challenge, difficulty, and adversity. And I'm ready for everything. Every morning and every night, well, depending on your nusach, every morning and every night, when we recite David Hashem Ori V'Yishi, we're taken back to when David HaMelech stood in the smoldering ashes of Tziklug, with no family, no friends, and no possessions, nothing in this world, wondering how he was going to get through this, and he embedded himself with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And by the way, This was at the beginning of David HaMelech's life. This was, not the beginning of his life, but he wasn't king over Klal. He was anointed, but this is before he became David Melech Yisrael. Can you imagine had David crumbled down into the ashes of Siklag? You know what would have happened? Klal Yisrael would have never had David Malka Mashiach, and the Messianic line would have never started. Sometimes the willingness to stand straight and stand strong in your Siklag moments of life doesn't just have an impact on you, but has an impact in future generations as well. So we recite this kapitel every day from Chodesh Elul through the end of the Yomim Noraim season. Why? I'm ready for the coming year to bring me the most incredible bracha imaginable. But when the Siklag moments of life occur, which they will, I'm going to work on now, what life is good, establishing a strong relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so that when those Siklag moments of life occur, I have my anchor, I have my rock, I have my stability. We should be Zochei Meretz Hashem, not just to say this kapitel, but Meretz Hashem to ingest and to internalize its lesson. We should truly be gebenched with a year filled with mazel, with bracha, a year in which Meretz Hashem, Klal Yisrael doesn't have hostages, Klal Yisrael doesn't have war, Klal Yisrael only has shalom. And we should be Zochei Meretz Hashem for a year ahead, a beautiful bracha, all types of bracha, and most of all, again, the greatest bracha of all, the bracha of Geula, the bracha of Mashiach and Rabbi Aminu. Amen. Next week, there's no morning shir, no Tuesday morning shir, but there is Tuesday night. Meretz Hashem is the pre-Yamim Noraim shir, 8 o'clock. We'll put it on the WhatsApp. Also, if you're not part of the WhatsApp group, this QR code on top, if you scan it, that'll put you on the WhatsApp group. All the updates go out on there. Have a wonderful day, everyone.